What's up, everybody? Nameco Dustin here with your Week 8 Fantasy Fix. For Dustin gives you a very knowledgeable CEO-like
nice
tip. I try sometimes. Halloween editions next week. Get excited for it. For those that have been watching, it's annual.
And don't forget, if you post messages in our forums and we pick your questions to be answered on the show, you get a koozie.
Yeah, I've already hit up the people that were answering this one.
Everyone likes koozies. But I do have a tip. Ooh. Nice stuff. I do have a tip for you. At this point in the year, people are putting a lot of stock into fantasy points against. As far as, my wide receivers playing this defense, and they've given up the most points to fantasy wide receivers this year, so I'm starting them. I mean, obviously you need to pay attention to that, but don't put too much stock into it to where it makes you make a bad decision. For example, last week, Nick Foles going up against Dallas. Dallas is giving up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks heading into last week. I saw Foles getting started over RG3, some other really big names.
And that actually happened too, Dustin. That's why I brought it up. I know people will be like, who would do that? Somebody did that to him.
It did happen. And I mean, on paper, it looked like a nice matchup. But don't forget who they've played. I mean, remember what Peyton Manning did to Dallas, and a couple other good quarterbacks had good games against Dallas. So, in a team that might not be as good played, the Vikings and the Browns and, all the teams with bad quarterback situations. So it's going to skew the numbers.
And if you're just looking at NFL numbers as a whole, just remember some teams haven't had their bye yet. So if you look at total points against from just NFL stat standpoints,
I think most of them do averages though. I think when they
but sometimes they've gotten the most scored against. ESPN loves to do that.
I can see that.
All right. Always arguing. For time.
Always right. That's
from Dave.
Dave B.
B. Because he's always right. Wants to know Big Ben at Oakland or Carson Palmer versus Atlanta. 75% of the community says Big Ben. It's a pretty obvious question to me. Don't even know why you put it on there, but since you're always right, go ahead. Try to make an argument why it's close.
I'm definitely not always on these. But Palmer's had some good games this year, but he's been so inconsistent. And when you watch them play, it's almost like their offensive line isn't even there. I mean, Carson Palmer's just constantly under pressure. Big Ben is kind of the same way, but he can fight through a lot of it and still do stuff with moving around in the pocket. I think you got to go Big Ben here, but I see why you're thinking about it, but Big Ben's the clear choice. Next is a trade question from Mihernicik. There you go.
Always right, huh?
Can't make sense of that one.
Always right.
Should they trade Harry Douglas to get Ridley in return? 60% of the community saying yes.
Yeah, these questions are tough to say when we see it in the forums because what we really need is the rest of your roster. I mean, you could be dealing Harry Douglas and you got Calvin and Wes Welker and Vincent Jackson, and those are your three starters. Well, clearly you can easily get rid of Harry Douglas, but regardless, I'm saying go ahead and do this deal. Harry Douglas did blow up. That pretty much all happened in the first half last week. Roddy White is going to be back, hopefully at some point this year, owning him in 4 leagues. Hate you right now, Roddy. But he should be back, be himself again, and when that happens, Douglas will be the clear-cut number 2 and not get nearly the same amount of targets. I think that you're selling high on Douglas, buying low on Ridley, which I really like. Even though Vereen is coming back, I understand that as well, but still, I'd say go with Ridley.
Take the run back.
All right, Dustin, Dr. Frankenstein. I should have saved that for the Halloween edition.
Oh.
Always right over here. Would have made a lot more sense there. Pierre Garçon at Denver or Ruben Randall at Philly, and about 90% of the community is saying to go with Garçon.
Yeah, I mean, don't let Randall's touchdowns that he's had over the last few games, make you make a decision that probably isn't the best one. I mean, Garçon's the way to go here. He's much safer. Randall, yes, he has an upside. He could have some big plays, but he's not even out on the field that much. I do love Randall. I love his upside. I think he's going to phase Knicks out to a point. Knicks might even get traded. We'll see, but
they're trying.
This week, with the matchup Garçon has, with the Redskins probably having to play from behind, you got to go with him this week.
All right, studs, and
duds, sleepers, and deep sleepers. Stuck in the past. My dud is Jordan Cameron. Now, before you just go throwing him right into your bench, let me just make sure. A lot of teams, Jordan Cameron's probably their only tight end, and obviously you're starting him. A lot of leagues, you're obviously starting him.
Hold on. He's probably not your only tight end. Most people would take Gronk and then Cameron and goes like that. Just because I took Cameron as my only tight end in a bunch of leagues doesn't mean the rest of the world's doing it. Okay. But go ahead.
So a lot of people at this point probably have Cameron as their only tight end.
At this point.
They're going at Kansas City, tough matchup. All I'm saying with Cameron is this week is a week that you should consider. If you have another decent tight end on your bench, you might want to take make the swap, because Cameron hasn't been amazing the last few weeks. He did get the touchdown last week to save his week, but he hasn't been what he was back when Hoyer was throwing him the ball.
Always right.
I was getting there. My sleeper is Boykin, going up against Minnesota. Decent matchup for him. I know a lot of people are probably really high on him at this point, but I wanted to just reiterate that I think you should be, especially with James Jones. Not quite ready. He might play, but he'd probably be limited. So I like Boykin. I don't think it was a fluke. I think he can have another big week. And then my deep sleeper is Lance Moore going up against Buffalo. The signs are pointing to Lance Moore playing. And here's what I want to say about this. There's a lot of receivers on a bye this week. You're looking at the waiver wire. There's not much upside there. As far as a boom or bust type player, if you're looking for a potentially home run type guy, Lance Moore could be the guy for you, but he could also only get 1 point. So keep that in mind.
All right, my bust or dud is going to be Roy Halou, and here's why. I know he had 3 touchdowns last week, and he looked great, and all the reports coming out from Washington is saying, oh, they really love using him in the red zone because he can hit the holes faster and whatnot. So Halou could be a decent play, sure, but he is going to be the hit or miss kind of running back. He's not going to get much between the 20s in terms of touches, I don't think. So just don't do anything crazy with him and be starting him. I know 6 teams are on a bye, so you might have to plug him in, but just don't do anything crazy and start him over guys that you know are going to get the bulk of the carries based on this 3-touchdown performance. My sleeper, quote-unquote, is going to be Le'Veon Bell. I just love him this week. Again, 6 teams on the bye. He could arguably possibly ranked in my top 10 this week in terms of running backs. Maybe even a little bit in the top 7 possibly. And here's why. Oakland is terrible against the run. Just god-awful. Bell, to me, has been very impressive. Last week was another very impressive game. I love the kid's vision. He hits holes very hard. I can certainly see him falling into the end zone once, if not twice, this week. And then my deep sleeper is Joseph Foria. Detroit ended up cutting Tony Shepard, so then they got Pettigrew there. But this kid looked great. I loved watching him. He was only targeted 4 times. He's a monster. And you can only take beat writers so much with a grain of salt. But all the beat writers have said in the practices, they've been using him more. And with them cutting their other tight end, I still like him. He's not a tight end 1 quite yet, but if you're in deeper leagues, got bye week issues, I think he's a great pickup and play. And see if he finds the end zone. He's not going to do it 3 times like he did 2 weeks ago. But
all right, moving to Mike's picks. His dud, Mike James, one of the hottest pickups of the week. Tough matchup, though, going up against the Panthers. And that offense, especially with the running game, has not really looked that great all year. So not really liking Mike James. His sleeper, Terrence Williams. Miles Austin just isn't coming back. He might be back, but he's not back. So Terrence Williams is still going to be the guy. Decent matchup against Detroit. And he's always just 1 play away from having a good week. And his deep sleeper is Andrew Corliss for the Packers. With Finley hurt, maybe not even playing for the rest of the year, he's got an opportunity here. The Packers don't really have that many options left for Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball to. Boykin stepped up last week. He's going to have to do it again this week. But Corliss, typically a blocking tight end, might actually get a few passes his way.
And let me just preface one thing. For sleepers, it's normally, we look at that as like guys that you might have as like a flex option, and you're like, should I start him, should I not? And a deep sleeper is somebody that's, obviously digging really deep, somebody that might be available on the waiver wire. We obviously know that, obviously Williams and Le'Veon Bell they're owned, but that's kind of how we look at it. So getting to our heads a little bit.
There you go. Glad you cleared that up. Thank you.
Somebody might wanted to know that. This guy.
Halloween show next week. Make sure to check it out. Got any questions? Post them in the forum.
Oh, it's terrible.